attack on Pearl Harbor in December of 1941 was one of the single most unifying and enraging moments in American history. This daring gamble by the Japanese was the brainchild of none other than Japanese Admiral Yamamoto. His plan was to destroy as much of the U.S. Pacific Fleet in port as possible in order to clear the way for further offensive operations throughout the Pacific. What resulted was the damaging and destruction of 19 U.S. warships, 300 aircraft, and the death of over 2,400 U.S. servicemen. This, in fact, cleared the way for further Japanese operations as they immediately set out their conquest throughout the Pacific, rolling up places such as Hong Kong, Malaya, the Dutch East Indies, New Guinea, Guam, Wake Island, and the Philippines. Following this string of early defeats, the U.S. looked for opportunities to not only regain the initiative, but to exact revenge for the surprise attack. What followed was the Doolittle raid on Japan, and while this air raid boosted American morale and struck back at the Japanese homeland, it would not be until April of 1943 that the U.S. would find its chance for revenge on the man behind Pearl Harbor, Admiral Yamamoto. By this point in the war, the momentum had swung in the favor of the United States. The stunning victory over the Japanese at the Battle of Midway in 1942 and the ongoing Solomon Islands campaign saw the U.S. on the offensive. Meanwhile, the Japanese combined fleet was under the command of Admiral Yamamoto, and on April 14th, U.S. radio interception sites discovered details of Admiral Yamamoto's upcoming inspection tour of Japanese bases in the Solomon Islands. This intelligence report allowed American commanders the prime opportunity to intercept and shoot down Admiral Yamamoto's plane. Not only would this extract revenge for Pearl Harbor, but it would also eliminate the commander currently responsible for the Japanese Pacific Fleet's naval strategy. The American planners knew that Admiral Yamamoto would be flying from Rabaul Air Base to Bala Island and scheduled to arrive at 07:45 on the 18th of April, and the Admiral was known for his punctuality. With this information available, American commanders got to work planning their ambush. The planning for this raid was no small task. The nearest American airfield was Henderson Field on Guadalcanal. An American aircraft were going to be needed to fly an estimated 800 miles to the interception point and back. Furthermore, to avoid enemy radar, U.S. pilots would have to fly in a roundabout manner, totaling about 600 miles on the approach before flying a more direct 400 miles back. This results in a nearly 1,000-mile flight, far exceeding the ranges of Navy and Marine fighters such as the F-4F Wildcat and the F-4U Corsair. There was only one American fighter that could carry out this task, the Lockheed P-38 Lightning. Its overall design was distinct and unlike any other U.S. fighter. The twin-boom design and twin engines provided it with a strong top speed of 414 miles per hour and a cruising speed of 275 miles per hour. But for this mission, its ability to carry external fuel tanks, called drop tanks, was key. The aircraft had a max range of 1,300 miles, while the Wildcat and Corsair only had a range of 845 and 1,005 miles, respectively. The aircraft's unique design made it a favorite of Army Air Force pilots in the Pacific for this fact, as well as its heavy firepower. The P-38 had originally been designed to intercept enemy bombers, and thanks to that it boasted 450 caliber machine guns, as well as a 20mm autocannon mounted in the nose. This proved an extremely deadly combination, one that would be utilized to shoot down the larger G-4 Betty aircraft transporting Admiral Yamamoto. The mission was assigned to the 339th Fighter Squadron, commanded at the time by Major John W. Mitchell, already an ace in the war, who was chosen to lead the flight. Due to the open ocean flying, Mitchell requested a Navy compass installed into his P-38 for better navigation. Further preparations were made by flying in a limited supply of larger 330-gallon drop tanks from New Guinea. This allowed each P-38 to carry one of these larger 330-gallon drop tanks, as well as two smaller 165-gallon drop tanks. A total of 18 aircraft were assigned to the mission, with a flight of 4 designated as the killer flight, while the rest, including 2 spare aircraft, would climb to 18,000 feet in order to provide top cover for an expected Japanese fighter response. They planned their mission working backward, knowing what time they needed to arrive to intercept Admiral Yamamoto. On April 18, 1943, the group of P-38s took off from Henderson Airfield, with 2 aircraft dropping out, one with a flat tire and one with issues feeding fuel to the engines from the drop tanks. The aircraft flew at wave-top level over hundreds of miles of open ocean, with only the use of dead reckoning, using their speed and compass heading for navigation, and avoided detection. They arrived 1 minute earlier than they had planned, but just in time to watch two G-4M Bettys descend from the light haze. Without knowledge of which aircraft Admiral Yamamoto was in, the P-38's leapt into action. One P-38, piloted by Lieutenant Rex T. Barber, raked the first Japanese aircraft with 50 caliber and 20 mm cannon fire, hitting the right engine as well as the rear fuselage and empennage. Once his rounds began to strike the left engine of the bomber, it began to belch thick, heavy black smoke before rolling hard to the left and crashing into the jungle below. Barber then headed to the coast in search of the second aircraft, unsure of which held the Japanese admiral. He spotted his fellow pilot, Lieutenant Besby F. Holmes, mid-attack, striking the right engine of the Betty before overshooting due to his high speed. Barber fired on the crippled bomber before watching it descend and crash into the water below. What resulted was the death of Admiral Yamamoto, who was in the aircraft which crashed into the jungle, while much of his staff was on the second aircraft which went down into the water. Following this, a dogfight broke out between the American P-38's and escorting Japanese Zero fighters, before ultimately the American aircraft were able to slip away. In the aftermath, one P-38 piloted by Lieutenant Raymond L. Hine disappeared, presumed crashed into the water, but Admiral Yamamoto and several of his staff were dead. Operation Vengeance demonstrates how the use of intelligence, advanced aircraft technology, and precise mission planning led to the success of this style of a high-risk raid. The killing of this key Japanese commander shifted both the psychological and strategic momentum of the Pacific War. And while the operation is not as well known as the Doolittle raid, its legacy is still important. Following the 2020 killing of Iranian General Qasem Soleimani, senior U.S. officials cited the killing of Admiral Yamamoto as precedence. And interesting to note is both strikes received criticism, with the British upset by Operation Vengeance, worried that it would tip off the Japanese to Allied code breaking.